Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Daled, and Mirza Hashem today we will be learning Daf Reish Lamed Beis Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn the halachas of Eruv Chatzeros. We pick up today on Reish Lamed Beis Amid Aleph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 lines off the bottom in the middle of Siman Shin Samach Vav Sif Yud by the words V'yesh Oimrim. Our learning today should be a schus for Achedim Kabeis Yisrael, Hanusunu Batzaro Bashivya, Ha'imdim Ben Bayamu Ben Bayabasha, Hamakim Yerachem Alehem, V'yetzim Mitzar L'Rvacha Me'afel L'Oiro Mishubid L'Geula, Hashtam Agalo V'zman Kariv V'Damar Amen. Our learning should be a schus for Chayla Yisrael, for Refuah Shalema, and our learning should be a schus for Baruch Shem should watch over all of our brothers and sisters who find themselves in harm's way. We have a lot to cover, so I want to get started very, very quickly. So before we move on to the V'yesh Oimrim in Sif Yud, right? The V'yesh Oimrim is going to be a Deya Shnia, a second opinion on what we have been discussing here in Sif Yud. So before we move on to the V'yesh Oimrim, I think we need to give a recap of the first opinion, what we learned here in Sif Yud. So we're discussing the question of somebody who's preparing in Eruv Chatzeros, and we've learned that you don't necessarily need to go around to all the Bnei HaChatzer and actually collect physical contributions of pas or of flour to the Eruv. What you can do instead is, one person could be zoicha in the pas of the Eruv Chatzeros on behalf of all the Bnei HaChatzer. So he's going to take the pas and he's going to say, I'm being zoicha in this pas for all the Bnei HaChatzer. Now this pas belongs to everybody in the Chotzer, and we're going to take this pas and put it into one of the bottom of the Chotzer, and now we have an Eruv Chatzeros. However, one person cannot do this alone, because if one person takes his own pas, he's not accepting it on behalf of everyone. It's his. He really needs to give it, right? He needs to give it to everyone. And then when it belongs to everyone, now we have a joint pas to create a Eruv Chatzeros. One person cannot do that alone. What does the person have to do? He has to take the pas that's going to be the Eruv Chatzeros. He has to be moitzi it mirishusai. He has to give it away. It's his pas. He has to give it to everybody. How does he give it to everybody? Well, he has another individual with him. So let's say, again, we're doing this with the Gabai and the Rav, the Shamish and the Rav. So the Shamish is going to take pas. The Shamish is going to hand the pas off to the Rav. The Rav is going to accept the pas. So the Shamish is giving the pas away. The Rav is going to be makabel the pas. The Rav is going to accept the pas, and he's going to accept it on behalf of everyone. He's going to be zoiche in it on behalf of all the Bnei HaChatzer. Now you have a pas that belongs to all the Bnei HaChatzer. You take it, you put it into one of the bottom in the Chatzer, and you have a proper Eruv Chatzeros. Over here in Sif Yud, we're discussing the question of who can you do this with? When you want to hand it off to somebody, who do you need to hand it off to? Who can you not hand it off to? And the Mechaber discussed over here several cases. So the first case that the Mechaber discussed was B'noi Ubitai Haketanim. If somebody has minor children, either a minor son or a minor daughter, he can't take the pas and hand it off to them so that they should go ahead and be makabel the pas on behalf of all the Bnei HaChatzer. Why not? The Mishnah Berurah said the reason is Neshe Yadon Ki Yadoi. Literally what those words mean is that their yad, their hands, their reshus of these minor children is the same as the father's reshus. So like the Mishnah Berurah said, the father's not being moitzi it mirishusai. He's not giving it away. He's kind of taking it from one pocket and putting it into the other pocket. Now, the truth is, this is a very complex sugya that's not in the halachas of Arachayim. It's really in the halachas of Choshen Mishpat. But basically, I think what the Mishnah Berurah means over here, first of all, this lashon of Yadon Ki Yadoi is not the Chavetz Chaim's lashon. It's taken directly from a Mishnah in Masechtas Eruvin on Daf. What is it? The Mishnah Berurah brings it down in the Sheretz Sion. 1 second. It's cut Mem Zayin. Right. It's the Mishnah on Ayin Tesam and Beis in Masechtas Eruvin. The Mishnah uses this lashon Memneshe Yadon Ki Yadoi. essentially what it really means is that benoi ubitoi haktanim, or any katan, or any ktana, does not have a yad. They don't have the legal ability to be zoiche in something, to be koine something. Even the Gemara Gittin says that when a katan or a ktana reaches a certain age, when they reach an age where they can discern between valuable items and non-valuable items, and non-valuable items like pebbles they'll throw away, and a valuable item like a nut they'll keep, so they already have a basic understanding of value and of possessions. At that point, the Gemara Gittin says they could be zoiche in something for themselves. The Rambam brings down that halacha, but the Magid Mishnah over there on the Rambam says not so quick. Even a katan or a ketana that age, they can't really be zoiche in something by themselves. If they find a mitzvah and they pick up a mitzvah, it doesn't really belong to them. You're not allowed to take it away from them because of a din d'Rabbanan, bipnei darkei shalom. But they really can't be zoiche in something by themselves. A katan or a ketana does not have a yad. Therefore, you can't hand over the Eruv Chatzeris to them. You're not handing it off to a person who has the legal capacity to make a kinyan. If so, you didn't really hand it off. So yadan ki yadai, you didn't remove it from your hand. You gave it to somebody who doesn't have a yad. You gave it to somebody who doesn't have an independent rishus. So how could they be zoiche in it for other people? They can't be zoiche in anything at all. So that's case number one, the Mechaber said. You cannot use benayu bita aktanim. Then the Mechaber expanded upon that. The Mechaber said, this is true, and this is going to be very important for what we're going to learn at the beginning of today's shir, when we move into the second opinion. The Mechaber said this is true, even if these ketanim are not soymech al shulchanai. Even if the father is not supporting these minor children, he still can't hand off the erev to them. What's the chiddush in that? The chiddush in that is, when a father does not support his minor children, then the halacha is if they find a mitzvah, the mitzvah belongs to them. They get to keep it. It doesn't belong to the father. Now you might look at that and say, oh, the kid finds a mitzvah, he's entitled to keep it. Doesn't that mean that the kid has a yad? The answer is no. The kid still doesn't have a yad. Really, the kid picks up that mitzvah. The only reason somebody can't grab it from him is mipnei darkei shalom. Really, the kid doesn't have a yad. He's a katan or a ketana. Why does he get to keep it? Because normally when a kid finds a mitzvah, it belongs to the father. Because since the father supports the kid, mipnei eva, we don't want there to be resentment between father and child. We say that the mitzvah goes to the father. But when the father's not supporting the child, so then the mitzvah doesn't go to the father. But that's not a raya that the kid has an independent yad. The kid still doesn't have a yad. That was case number 2. Case number 3, the Mechaber said, you can't hand off the erev to avdoi v'shivchasai haknanim. An eved kanani, a shivcha kananis, you can't hand it off to them. Why? Because again, they don't have a yad. Mashakana eved kana rabbi. So you're not handing it off to an entity that has their own independent yad. The zicher can't be zoicha in the erev for anybody else. Then the Mechaber said, according to this opinion, but you could use benoi ubitoi hagdolim. Your adult children, you could use. They're adults. They have a yad. So they're fully legally capable of being zoicha in something. They could be zoicha in something on behalf of the bnei chatzir as well. Then the Mechaber said, chiddush, this is true even if these adult children are soymech on the shulchan of the father. The father is supporting them. Why is that a chiddush? Because if the father is supporting them, even though they're gdolim, even though they're adults, if they find the mitzvah, who does the mitzvah belong to? The father. So you might think, oh, they don't have a yad. Says the Day Rishon, of course they have a yad. We let the father keep their mitzvah, again, because of Eva, because we don't want the father to resent the children and stop supporting them. But it's not a question that they don't have a yad. They're gdolim, of course they have a yad. Then the Mechaber said, you could hand off the erev to an eved ivri or to an amah ivriya, even if they're ktanim. That was a massive chiddush. Even though they're ktanim? What do you mean? They don't have a yad. They're ktanim. Okay, Mishnah Berurah says, guess what? In this case, for whatever reason, the Chazal were makel. In Eruv Chatzeris is a Rabbanan. They said you could use an eved ivri and amah ivriya even though they're ktanim. Okay, then the Mechaber said, how about your wife? The Mechaber said, according to the Day Rishona, you could hand off the erev to a wife, even though you support the wife. What's the even though? Well, if you support the wife, again, her mitzvah belongs to you because you're supporting your wife. She finds something, it belongs to you. But it doesn't matter according to this opinion. She's an adult. Since she's an adult, she has a yad. And the Mishnah Berurah brought down, there's a raya that she has a yad. What's the raya? Were somebody to give the wife a gift and give it to her conditionally that her husband should not be zoich in it, her husband should not be kain in it, guess what? The husband wouldn't be kain in it. So you see very clearly that a wife does have a legal independent yad. Therefore, you could give her the erev, she could be zoich in it for the b'nei hachotzer. The Mechaber said, another chiddush, this is true, even if the wife does not have an independent home in the chotzer. Okay, now we move on to the second opinion. Says the Mechaber. However, there's a second opinion here that says, she'ena mizak al yedei b'nayu b'itay hasmucham al shulchanai afilu heim gedolim. Over here, the second opinion is being machmir. The second opinion says you can't hand off the erev to your children, even if they're adults. Even if they're adults, you can't hand off the erev to them if they're samech on your shulchan, if you're supporting them. Why? So the Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us that this second opinion ties the halacha of a ruvei chatzeros to the halacha of a mitzvah. In any case where an individual does not have the ability to halachically keep their mitzvah, something that they find, and instead it belongs to the father or it belongs to the husband, then you can't use them for the ruvei chatzeros because that shows that to a certain extent they don't have an independent yad. So you have a son or a daughter who is a full adult, but if they're samech al shulchancha, if you support them, so that if they find the mitzvah belongs to you, you can't use them for ruvei chatzeros because that's a reyesa in their yad. It's a weakness in their yad. You see that legally they don't completely have their own yad. So that's case number one of the second opinion. You can't be mezako. Here it's a chumrah. You can't use b'nayu b'itay asmucham al shulchanai afilu heim gedolim. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut in Samach Aleph. V'yesh oimrim svir lahu. These opinions hold the damya erev le'inyan mitzvah, that you tie the halacha of a ruvei chatzeros to the halacha of a mitzvah. The chol heichad svir la le'inyan mitzvah de'en lo yad b'fnei atzmai. Whenever you see in the context of the halachas of a mitzvah that the person does not have a completely independent yad, v'shayich la'avihen, and in the case of children, the mitzvah would go to the father, like b'nayu b'itay hagdolim that are samach al shulchanai, oy b'isha shemaitzais mitzvah v'shayich al baila, or in any case where if a woman would find the mitzvah, it would belong to her husband, who hadin le'inyan erev. Then when it comes to the context of hilchas erevin, ein lehem yad b'fnei atzmam, that shows that they don't have a completely independent yad, v'adayin lo yotza merishusai, and therefore, if you hand it to them, you're handing off the erev to somebody who's not legally, fully an independent entity. They don't have a complete yad, and therefore it's as if you didn't hand it off, and then they can't be zoich in it for the b'nei hachotzer. Okay, let's go weiter in the Mechaber, 3 lines off the bottom. Another case, v'loya yedei b'itay. According to this opinion, you can't hand off the erev to your daughter. Afilu eina smucha al shulchanai. Even if you're not supporting her, kol zman shaloi bagra. As long as she's not a complete gedola. If she didn't attain the age of bagrus yet, if she's not 13, you can't hand off the erev to her. Says the Mishnah Berurah Sabbath Gilbert calls man shalei bagra. Does shaykh mitziyas al avia, because the mitziyah of a daughter belongs to the father, even if the father is not supporting her until she's a begeris. A begeris by a girl is a complete adult. Why is that? Because the halach is that a father could accept kedushin for her daughter until she's a begeris. And if we're going to create resentment between a father and a daughter, maybe the father will go ahead and marry her off. And if he marries her off, maybe he'll decide to marry her off to the highest bidder or to the first person who comes knocking on the door, no matter who he is. So we never want to play with creating resentment between a father and a daughter. Therefore, Chazal said that the mitzvah of a daughter always belongs to the father, even if the father's not supporting her, until she's a begeris. And therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, says the Mechaber, according to this second opinion, you can't hand off the erev to a daughter until she's a begeris, even if you're not supporting her. Says the Mechaber weiter, V'lo yagidei ishtay, and you can't hand off the Erev to a wife. Shamala la mezainos, if you're supporting her, because if you're supporting her, again, her mitzvah belongs to you. So if you're supporting her, you can't use her for iruvei chatzeres. It's a weakness in her yad. Or even if you're not supporting her, but she'amar la, but you told her, tzi'i ma'asi yadayich b'mezainosayich, you have a good job. Really, I'm entitled to keep your earnings, but I'm going to give you back your earnings. You keep your earnings, use it for your own parnasa, use it for your own mezainos, and I'm not going to support you anymore. But in that case, if her parnasa is sufficient to support herself with, then the halacha is that the husband still keeps her mitzvah. And if the husband keeps the mitzvah, then it's a weakness in her yad, and you can't use her to hand off an erev. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Samech Dalid, Shamala Lamazainis, a wife that you're supporting, does mitzvah salabaila. If you're supporting her, you keep her mitzvah, weakness in her yad. Ois Cotton Samech, Ois Sha'amar la tzi'i. Or you tell her, you know what, you got a good job, keep your earnings, sustain yourself with your earnings, I'm not supporting you. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Mairi b'maspekes ma'asi yadel l'mazainos. Now, Mechaber is specifically addressing a case where her earnings are going to be enough to support her. Di'i ein maspekes l'mazainos, if she doesn't earn enough money to support herself, ein mitzvah salabayla. Then, if she finds a mitzvah, it doesn't belong to her husband. If a husband turns to wife and says, you know what, I don't want to support you anymore. Go get a job, keep your earnings, support yourself. Well, if her earnings are not sufficient for her to support herself with, and the husband is not supporting her, then the Chazal said she gets to keep her own mitzvah because she needs it to support herself. In that case, she has an independent yad. And then you could use her, even according to this second opinion, you could use her for an erev. Says the Mechaber weiter, bottom line, middle of the line, Va'afilu yesh la bayis b'chotzer. If it's a case where the mitzvah of the wife goes to the husband, so either the husband is supporting her, or he's not supporting her, but her earnings are enough, so then you can't use her for an erev. Va'afilu yesh la bayis b'chotzer. This is true, even if she happens to independently own a home in the chotzer, and she eats in that home. You still can't use her for an iruvei chatzeros. Says the Mishnah Berurah, is cotton samach vav, va'afilu yesh la bayis, turning to Reish Lamed Beis, Lamed Beis. Ritzayin Alarma, what Mechaber wants to say is, vayichel sham hamazoyne shalasa la bayla. She happens to own an independent home in the chotzer, and she eats, for whatever reason, she eats in that home in the chotzer. Yeah, but what food is she eating? She's eating the food that her husband gives her, because her husband is supporting her in this case. You might have thought that in such a case, you could use the woman to hand off the erev. Why? Because, after all, she has her own home in the chotzer. And if she has her own home in the chotzer, then she has to be covered independently by the iruvei chatzeros. And therefore, you might think, she has to have a part in the erev. She has to own a chelik in the erev of this chotzer because she has an independent home in the chotzer. So you might say, hold it, scratch my head over here. If you're saying that she's capable of owning her own independent chelik in the erev to cover her independent home in the erev, so certainly she should be able to be zoiche in the erev for everybody else. Tizke be'erev gam la'acherim, kamash b'lan deloi. No, she can't. She still can't be zoiche on behalf of the other B'nai HaChotzer, according to this opinion. Why? Because since her mitzvah belongs to her husband, it's a reisa in her yad. V'atam, de be'emes la'atzma ein tzrich erev klal. The Mishnah Berurah says there's another reason why. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the reason is because even though she owns an independent home in the Chotzer and she eats over there, really she doesn't need to have a chelik in the erev. Dinimsheches achar baila. Because since the food that she eats belongs to her husband, even though she has an independent home, she's considered an extension of the husband. She's not a separate entity from the husband that she should aser on everybody else. Kittel kaman b'simin shenayin sivav, like we're going to see later on in shenayin v'leka migui. Going weiter in the Mechaber, turning back to Reish Lamed Beis Amud Aleph, the last two words. Aval, however, according to this second opinion, mizaka al yidei benoi Now we're going to see a kula according to this second opinion. Since this day of Shnia ties the halacha of a Ruvei Chatzeros to the halacha of a Metzia, to the halachas in Choshev Mishpat, therefore says the Mechaber, according to this second opinion, a father could hand off the Erev to his son that he's not supporting, even if he's a cotton. Cotton doesn't have a yad. Yeah, but you know what? He gets to keep his Metzia because the father's not supporting him. Yeah, it's only Mipnei Darkei Shalom. But he gets to keep his Metzia. If he gets to keep his Metzia, that's enough of a yad that for the Din D'Rabbanan of a Ruvei Chatzeros, you could use him to be Mezaka on behalf of the other Bnei HaChatzer, according to this opinion. So this is a kula that we have in the second opinion over the Day Rishona. Another one, V'al-Yidei Bitay Shebagra, according to this opinion, you have a daughter that's a full adult, she's a begeres, ve'eina smucha al shulchanai, so okay, yeah, she keeps her mitzvah, she's a full adult, you're not supporting her, get married her off, so yeah, you could use her. V'al-Yidei Ishtai she'eina malala mezaynais, and you could use a wife that you're not supporting, afilu ein la bayis b'chatzer. Okay, let's see the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Samach Zayin, afilu hu katan. You could use a son that's not samach al shulchanai, even if he's a cotton. Kevin del inyi mitzia yesh lo yad lo zakis la atzma ki she'einu samach al shulchanaviv. Since his father's not supporting him and that entitles him to keep his mitzia, it's true that he's a cotton. Really, legally, he doesn't have a yad, but he has a yad to keep his mitzia, even though it's only Mipnei Darkei Shalom. But according to the second opinion, that's enough of a yad that you could use him to be mezaka for the other Bnei HaChatzer on a Din D'Rabbanan of Ruvei Chatzeros. If you have a daughter that's a begeres, she's a full adult, and you're not supporting her, it's an alarm. This is not, because there's really no chiddush here, right? You're talking about a girl who's a begeres, she's a full adult, and she's not samach al shulchan aviyah. So why would there be any tzad to say that you can't use her to be mezaka the Erev Chatzeros? There's no reason why not. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, the reason the Mechaber is saying this in the Day of Shnia is dafka ba'ofen zeh. According to the second opinion, it's only in this case that you could use a daughter. V'lo kedei harishona. This is a chumrah over the first opinion. This sphere lay, according to the first opinion, the kishebagra, according to the first opinion, who doesn't tie Ruvei Chatzeros to Mitzia. So the kishebagra, when a girl is a begeres, she's a full adult. She has a legal yad. So according to the first opinion, you could use her. Afilu bismucha mezak al yada. Even if she's saimach al shulchan aviyah, according to the first opinion, you could use her. She doesn't keep her mitzvah. Yeah, she doesn't keep her mitzvah because of Eva, because of resentment. But it's not a reyes in her yad. She has a complete yad. She's an adult. She's a begeres. So according to the Day Rishona, you can use her for Ruvei Chatzeros. But according to the second opinion, you can't. Why? Because since she's samach al shulchan aviyah, she doesn't keep her mitzvah. That's a reyes in her yad, and you can't use her for Ruvei Chatzeros. V'chein ba'al yidei ishtoi. So too when it comes to a wife. According to the second opinion, dafke heicha she'ein ma'ila lo mezainos. You can only use her if you're not supporting her. Does mitzvah la'atzma, because then she keeps her mitzvah. No reyes in her yad. V'lo l'bayla, and the mitzvah doesn't go to her husband. Okay, so now we have seen the two opinions, and we've seen kulas and chumras on both sides. Now, says the Mechaber, second line down near the end of the line, U'lechatchila toiv lachush l'divrei shneim heicha de'efsher. Lechatchila, says the Mechaber, we should follow the chumras on both ends. Okay, now the Rabbah says, Haga, u'b'di'eved, however, post facto, b'di'eved, you did use one of these people to hand off the Erev to. So then the Ramah is going to say, as long as it's okay according to one of these two opinions, b'di'eved will be saimach on it. B'di'eved saimchet al divrei ha'mekel be'erev. B'di'eved, we go l'kula when it comes to the question of a drabanan of a Ruvei Chatzeros. So you used benoi ubitoi haktanim. You used benoi, that's a cotton, that's not saimach al shulchanai. So according to the first opinion, he's a cotton. He doesn't have a yad. But according to the second opinion, since he's not samach al shulchanai, he gets to keep his mitzvah. It's okay. So you did it, but the Eved will go Lakula. That would be one example. So, but the Eved Samchet al Divrei HaMekel be'Erev. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cotton samach. Test Ritzayin Loimar. Bein cotton ve'ein samach al shulchanai. Whether we're talking about a case of a cotton who's not samach al shulchanai. According to the second opinion, it's good. According to the first opinion, it's not. Oy gadol, or we're talking about a ben who's a gadol, who's an adult. So according to the first opinion, he's good. Af shesamuch, but he's samach al shulchanai. So according to the second opinion, he's no good. V'chein ba'al yidei ishtai afal b'shamalim azaynais. Or a wife who's an adult, but you're supporting her. So according to the first opinion, it's okay because she's adult. But according to the second opinion, it's not okay because she keeps her mitzvah. We'll go lekula b'di'evet, according to the Ramah. Let's go weiter in the Ramah, third line down. Here the Ramah says an interesting halacha. V'chein gadol sheyesh lo isha. Says the Ramah, an adult son who's married. Af al pisha samach al shulchan aviv, even if the father is supporting him. So the father has got a son who's learning in Kol, and the father is completely supporting him, lock, stock, and barrel. But he's an adult, and he's married, he's got a wife, he's got a home. The Ramah says, listen, it's true that he's Samach al Shulchan Aviv, but he's married, he has his own home. That's enough. It means that he has his own yad, and you could use him for an Erev. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting ayin sheyesh isha she'ois ha'koil al das atzmai. Very nice, Tati is supporting him. But Lamaisa, he's married, he has his own home, he has a wife, he comes and goes as he pleases, he makes decisions on his own. Yeah, it's not costing him anything. But the bottom line is he makes decisions on his own. V'lo al das aviv, that's enough of an independent yad, and therefore you could use him for being mezaka in an Erev. And the Ramah says this is true v'afilu l'chatchila. Okay, another halacha, says the Ramah. You go ahead and you make it a Eruv Chatzeros for the people of your town. Now, there's people living in the town who don't know the halachas of Eruv Chatzeros at all. They move into town and they want to know, is there an Erev? What do they mean? They mean, are there poles and strings and telephone wires and telephone poles with lechis and pasim and everything else? They say, yeah, there's an Erev. They don't know anything about an Eruv Chatzeros. They certainly don't know that the Rav and the Gabbai made in Eruv Chatzeros. Says the Ramah, you should know. The Rav and the Gabbai, they're going to get together Erev Pesach in their house or in the shul. The Gabbai is going to hand off the box of matzahs to the Rav. The Rav is going to be a mazakin in l'chol b'nei ha'ir, l'chol b'nei ha'chotzer. You don't got to go make a chain call and call everybody up and say, you should know, we successfully made an Eruv Chatzeros, and the Rav had in mind to be zoiche in a chelik of the Eruv Chatzeros for you. You don't have to let them know. You don't have to be media them. Eli im moidiyam b'Shabbos motal ataltal. Now the Ramah says over here an interesting thing. The Ramah says, if you let them know on Shabbos, so you didn't let them know when you made the Erev. You let them know on Shabbos. They're allowed to be metaltal. Now the chiddush of the Ramah over here is, like I said, you don't need to let them know. And the truth is, you don't need to let them know at all. So why does, not even on Shabbos, you don't have to let them know. So why does the Ramah couch it in this lashon? Ela im moidiyam b'Shabbos, if you let them know on Shabbos, mutal ataltal. That sounds a little bit like you have to let them know. But that's not the halacha. You don't have to let them know. So what does the Ramah mean? If you let them know on Shabbos, they could be metaltal. I'll tell you what the Ramah means. The Ramah's not talking about the chiv of the Rav. The Ramah's talking about the individual. How did you go ahead and carry outside if you're not aware if there's an Eruv Chatzeros? What's the matter with you? You moved into town. Somebody said there's an Erev. What does that mean? I mean, that guy means that there's lechis and strings, and there's telephone poles and there's wires with lechis under them and everything else. How about an Eruv Chatzeros? Do you know if there's an Eruv Chatzeros? How are you carrying on Shabbos from inside the Erev, between the house and the outside, which is a chotzer? How are you going from the chotzer to the house and the house to the chotzer without knowing if there's an Eruv Chatzeros? So the Ramah is nemming on as a davar pashut that you're not going to dare carry outside if you don't know if there's an Eruv Chatzeros. Says the Ramah, if you found out about the Eruv Chatzeros on Shabbos, that's enough to allow you to go ahead and carry. You didn't know when the Erev was established. You don't need to know when the Erev was established. The Erev could be established totally without your knowledge. But how do you go ahead and carry if you don't know if there's an Eruv Chatzeros? It's a double pashut to the Ramah that you're going to find out if there's an Eruv Chatzeros. Says the Ramah, you should know if you found out on Shabbos. When Shabbos started, you didn't know if there was an Eruv Chatzeros. You went to Shul Shabbos morning, you wanted to know if you could carry your talis home. You asked somebody, is it a Eruv Chatzeros? They said, yes, the Rav of the Gabak made it a Eruv Chatzeros. Okay, so now you can carry. You didn't know about it from its inception. You don't need to know about it by its inception. But how do you carry without knowing if there is one? I think that's the point, really. It's not that the Ramah wanted to make that point. I just think that's why the Ramah wrote it the way the Ramah wrote it. Because it's a double pashut. How do you carry without knowing if there's a Eruv Chatzeros or not? Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah. Ois katan ayin aleph. Ain't it tzarich leidiyah? You don't need to let the people know that you're making an Eruv Chatzeros. Dizachin la'adam shaloi b'fanav. Because this whole idea that the Gabbai can hand the Erev off to the Rav, and the Rav is bekabel it on behalf of everybody, and zoichin it on behalf of everybody, is based on the rule of Zachin la'adam shaloi b'fanav. It's a benefit for them. You're allowed to benefit for somebody without him even being aware of it. Okay, that was a very complex sif. Now let's move on to Sif Yud Aleph, a little bit easier. Says the Mechaber, an interesting halacha. Let's say you forgot to make it a Eruv Chatzeros. Now, the halacha is you're allowed to make it a Eruv Chatzeros even during Ben Hashmoshes. So even during the twilight period going into Shabbos, you're still allowed to make an Eruv Chatzeros. But you didn't. You totally forgot the Eruv Chatzeros. So you didn't make it a Eruv Chatzeros Erev Shabbos. You didn't make the Eruv Chatzeros Erev Pesach. You didn't make it Erev Shabbos. And now it's Friday night, and you realize you didn't make it a Eruv Chatzeros. Says the Mechaber, B'nei Chabura shahayu mesubed lecha. Let's say you're in this bungalow colony, where our famous bungalow colony of 21 units. You're in the bungalow colony, and you decided that for the first Shabbos of the summer, we're going to have a communal meal. We're going to get together in the big dining room, or they used to call it in Yiddish a kochalein. That was the big room, and I still remember this. You had sometimes in the bungalow colony, you had a big room, and there would be a stove over here, and a stove over there, and a stove over there, and some kitchen tables scattered around, and people had bungalows that didn't have kitchens. They had a bungalow that had maybe a little sitting room and a bedroom, but they didn't have kitchens. Where did they cook? They went into this room, and they had the little area to cook. So you have this communal dining room, let's say, in the bungalow colony, and they decide that for the first Friday night, everybody's eating together. So everybody comes, they sit down by the meal, and somebody says, so, who made the Eruv Chatzeros? Oh, there is no Eruv Chatzeros. Uh-oh, what now? Says the Mechaber, B'nei Chabur shayu mesubed lecha. They're sitting down Friday night to the Suda, after the Zman, not just after Shkia, after Tzeis HaKechavim. Kiddush alei hamayom. It's already Shabbos, it's not Ben Hashmoshes. Hapas sha'al hashulchan, the bread, the challah, that's on the table for the Friday night meal, Simchan alei misham erev. That's going to be the erev. Because think about it, Rabbi Yisai. What's the erev? The erev is communal bread. It's bread that everybody has a chelik in, and it's located in one of the bottom of the chutzner, and it says that all the Menach chutzner live over there. Well, if they're sitting down and they're having a communal Suda Friday night, that means that the bread that's on the table, the challah that's on the table, is communal challah. Now, we're going to see, even if technically it belongs to one person, let's say one person is sponsoring all the challah. He bought it, he owns it, but he's putting it out on the table for everybody, so everybody's allowed to eat from it. That's enough to say that it belongs to everybody. And if they're sitting and eating in one of the bottom of the chutzner, if it's the shul or it's the communal dining room, we can get into trouble. That's not a dira. But let's say they all got together in one of the bungalows. One person in the colony has a very big bungalow with a big dining room. So they got together over there. So the challah that's on the table Friday night is the erev. The erev is located in one of the bottom of the chutzner. Presto, you've got it in Eruv Chatzeros. That's the halacha that the Mechaber is saying here. Again, B'nei Chabura shayu mesubed lecha v'kiddush alei hamayom, hapash al hashulchan simchan alei misham erev. But, says the Mechaber, important caveat, v'hu shemesubed b'bayis, but they have to be eating in one of the bottom of the chutzner. Shehu makam aroyel and yasham erev. It has to be, like we learned about earlier, it has to be a place in the chutzner that's considered a bias. It's considered a makam dira in the chutzner. Ava b'chutzner loy. Let's say they decided to eat outside on the lawn in the chutzner. Well, it's very nice that you want to say that the pasta that's on the shulchan is an erev, but it's in the chutzner. It's not in one of the bottom. then it's not a valid Erev. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut 9 base. B'nei Chabura, what the Mechaber is teaching us over here is, Ashbi'inon Bazeh, the Mechaber is teaching us with this Shnei Dvarim 2 things. Echad, Avagav Shlo Yinichu L'Chatchilu L'Shem Erev. First of all, one Chiddush over here is, this challah that's on the table Friday night was never put out to be an Erev. Doesn't have to be. Gam, Da'afilu Oisei HaPasla Yoyin M'tchilu Shel Kulam. Maybe this challah didn't belong to everybody. Ki'im Shel Balabais Levad. Maybe it belongs to one of the people. Shezimnam Lisoid Mishaloi. Maybe it's not that they all decided to get together for a communal meal. The rich guy in the bungalow colony who has the biggest bungalow with the biggest dining room invited everybody in the bungalow colony to him for the first Friday night. So who does the challah belong to? It belongs to him. It doesn't belong to them. Still, he didn't get up by the suit and say, Rabbi Sai, I'm being makna a portion of the challah to you. No. Afilu hachi, still at all. Kevin shezimnan lechol imai, since he invited everybody to come eat with him, v'yechaylen lechol l'daitam, and everybody has the right to stick out their hand to the challah tray and take another piece of challah. They don't have to look at the balabayas and say, you mind? Is it okay? Is it okay if I take another piece of challah? No, they can take as much challah as they want. Hareyu ki'ilu nishtatfu by imai. That's as if they become shutvim. They become partners in the pas. V'yesh lehem b'yischus. They have a schus in the pas. V'alkein. And therefore, imukayim ad la'achar ben hashmoshes. As long as you have enough challah after ben hashmoshes that you have the shear of an erev, mazid shtei sudais, some k'nalom misham erev, that becomes the erev. You could rely on it to be the erev. Ois kat nine gimel. Hapas she'ala hashulchan. The challah that's on the bread, it's on the table. L'chayra, be'inan shia azadayin etzlam pasechet shalem v'chanal b'sivav. Interesting catch that the Chavetz Chaim has here. He says, yeah, you could use the challah on the table to be an erev, but remember we learned earlier that you can't be ma'arev b'prusa. You can't make an erev out of a piece. You have to make an erev out of a shalem. So says the Mishnah Berurah, according to that, there would have to still be a shalem on the table. If all you have on the table is sliced challah, you got a problem, because then you're being ma'arev b'prusa. Oy efsher, or it could be, says the Chavetz Chaim, kevin de lo yeviu pitam, since they didn't make individual contributions to the erev, ela balabayis zimnan lisayd mishaloi. The balabayis invited them to eat from his challah. We're saying a chiddush, even though it's his challah, since they have the right to eat from it, it becomes everybody's, and it could be the erev. So then, dinoi doima lahadis Zion. So then it becomes like we learned earlier in Siv Zion. What did we learn in Siv Zion? In Siv Zion, we said, yeah, you can't be ma'arev with a prusa, but that's only if everybody's making individual contributions. And remember, what we learned is, if everybody's making individual contributions, you can't make an erev with a prusa, because then there's going to be ava. It's going to come to machlokes and strife, because people are going to say, yo, you got away with giving a little piece to the erev. I had to give a whole challah to the erev. But that's not true. If one person is giving all the challah and he's being mezakeh to everybody, how could there be machlokes and strife? So too over here, says the Mishnah Berurah, l'chayra, if the case is that Ruvain in Unit 20 invited the whole bungalow colony to join him for the Friday night Suda, why can't you be ma'arev b'pas, b'prusa? How's there going to be machlokes? It all belongs to Ruvain, right? So where's the room for machlokes? And it says the Mishnah Berurah, v'chein mashma b'teisefes Shabbos. And teisefes Shabbos is mashma very much that over here the halacha v'ein ma'arvin b'prusa would not apply. Now the Mishnah Berurah says a very interesting thing. Alva be'emes yesh l'chalik b'neihem v'tzarachiyad. Chavetz Chaim's not happy. Chavetz Chaim doesn't like the idea that this is doima to Siv Zion. He thinks it's more doima to Siv Vav. I'm still puzzled as to why. I have to think it through. I don't have an answer yet. And he says, V'tzarachiyad. Ois Kanayin Dalet, the Chavetz Chaim reminds us that yes, you could be Saimach on the Challah by the Friday night Suda, but that's only if you're eating in one of the Batim Sheba Chotzer. Not if you're eating in the Chotzer, the Erev can't be in the Chotzer. It has to be in a bias. Ava B'chotzer loy, the Chotzer lav bar diruhu. Okay, let's go weiter. Going back to the Shulchan Aruch, third line from the bottom in the parentheses. V'hu adin im yesh lehem pas b'shutvis bechad bin abatim, says the parentheses over here, and note that it doesn't say hago here. So this probably is not a Ramah. Usually I say it's questionable whether it's the Ramah or not. Over here I'm going to say it's not the Ramah, because this is a very strange parentheses. There is zero chiddush. in this parentheses, and the Mishnah Berurah is going to point that out. The Mishnah Berurah is going to say, it's no chiddush here. And it's also not attributed to anybody. It doesn't say Haggah, which would attribute it to the Ramah, but it doesn't bring down a source. So I don't know how this parenthesis snuck in. It says here in the parentheses, we're saying a chiddush over here that if everybody's eating together Friday night, the challah on the table by the Friday night Suda could become the Erev. Says the parentheses, also, let's say all 21 people in the bungalow colony, for some strange reason, decided on Erev Shabbos to all get together and buy a big challah. And that challah happens to be located in one of the homes in the chutzner, in one of the units. But they didn't buy it l'shem Erev. And they didn't put it in the bias l'shem Erev. Why they do it? I have no clue. Maybe there's going to be a Sheva Brachas, Shabbos day. So all the Bnei HaChutzner decided, let's get together and chip in and buy a Suda Challah. So we should have a beautiful Suda Challah for the Sheva Brachas tomorrow morning. And now the Suda Challah is located in Unit 12. Okay. Does it have anything to do with an Erev? They didn't buy it l'shem Erev. They didn't put it in Unit 12 l'shem Erev. But they own the Challah. They all own the Challah b'shutfis. That's the case that the parentheses is talking about here. All the members, all 21 units of the bungalow colony happen to own a Suda Challah b'shutfis that's located in Unit 12. That could be the Erev. Now, which one of these halachas is a bigger chiddush? The first halacha that we learned in the Mechaber, or this halacha? In the first halacha, the challah on the table by the Suda Friday night doesn't even belong to everybody. It belongs to the Balabayas. It belongs to Unit 20, who invited everybody to his Friday night Suda. We're saying a chiddush. We're saying two chiddushim. They never established this challah to be an Erev. B, the challah doesn't even belong to everybody. It belongs to Unit 20. But since everybody has the right to take as much challah as they want, it could be an Erev. In the second case, we have a Suda challah in Unit 12 that belongs to everybody. Right? So, okay, it's still a chiddush, wasn't put there as an Erev, but it belongs to everybody. So it's less of a chiddush than the first halacha. So what do we need it for? Clearly we don't need it. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Kadayin, hey? V'hu adinim yeshlem, din zehu zevein sarch lermezu, hu zuvein sarch lermezu. B'chlal don't need this halacha. But they Sefer Shabbos Kosav the Kamash Balon, the Soimchan Alav B'cheska Shu Kayim Afa Pishein Yoidin Bas. One B'shum the Kmitmina Le'achas Kosei. The Sefer Shabbos tries to justify the fact that these parentheses snuck into the Shulchan Aruch, because trust me, nothing landed in the Shulchan Aruch without tremendous siyata d'shmaya. It's not somebody scribbled a useless note on the side and it got incorporated. If it landed in the text of the Shulchan Aruch, there was a siyata d'shmaya that put it in the text of the Shulchan Aruch. So the Sefer Shabbos says there is a shtickle chiddush here. You know what the shtickle chiddush is? Maybe you woke up to daven v'sikin Shabbos morning. My case was it was a Suda Challah for a Sheva Brachas. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe, I don't even know why, all the units chipped in to buy a challah. But when you wake up to daven v'sikin Shabbos morning, you don't know if that challah was eaten Friday night or it's still there. Kamash Balan, you could be saimach on the chazaka that it's still there, and distill an Eruv Chaseres, because if the challah of the Erev would all be gone, you don't have an Eruv Chaseres, right? We said that it could even become a kol shehu, it could become less than mazid shtei sudas, but something still has to be there. But if the whole challah would be eaten, you wouldn't have any Eruv Chaseres. Kamash Balan, you could be saimach chazaka, and you could assume that it's still there, and you can rely on it for an Erev. Okay. All right. Let's go a little bit weiter. Says the Mechaber Sif Yud Beis, 2 lines off the bottom. Apotropos shel katan yochel la'arev ba'adoi. Let's say you have Nebuchadnezzar katan who's a yasam. Katan, he lost his father, he lost his parents, he's alone. He has a Yerusha, but he's a katan. He doesn't have a yad. But one of the things he owns is a house. That house is in a chutzner. It's an entity in a chutzner. He has to be able to make it a Eruv Chaseros with the other Bnei HaChutzner, otherwise his house is going to aser on all the other Bnei HaChutzner. So he has an apotropos. What's an apotropos? An apotropos is a legal guardian. Bezdin established a legal guardian for this katan, and this legal guardian is able to make financial transactions on behalf of the katan, and they're binding legal financial transactions. Says the Mechaber, this apotropos could go ahead and contribute to the Erev on behalf of the katan. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Zayin Yochel Arev Ba'adoi Afilu Mishal Katan Shalom Midaitai, and he could do it from the katan's assets. So he could take flour, he could buy flour for the katan, and he could contribute that flour to the erev without the katan even knowing about it. We're going to see soon in Siman Shin Samach Zayin that very big chiddush. If someone's a ben bias, if somebody basically lives in another person's home, but he's not even related to him, and they come knocking on the door, we want a contribution for the erev. This ben bias is allowed to go into the kitchen cabinet, take out kemach, and give it in as a contribution for the erev on behalf of the balabais, even without the balabais knowing. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this apotropos of the katan is no less than a ben bias by a balabais. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time with Sif Yud Gimel. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be banging against Klal Yisrael. The Ramah Shem should say, Yeshua Sefurus Panas and Shadukim Tol Need. We should be zeichet to see the Bias Gal Tzedek B'meher V'Yameinu. Amen. Be well.